My sister-in-law shredded my daughter's acceptance letter to a summer arts conservatory because her own daughter didn't get in. She thought I would never find out. She thought the envelope buried at the bottom of her recycling bin was enough. She had no idea I was already on the phone with a federal postal inspector and that the house she was living in for $800 a month, below market rate, had my name on every single document. The drive home from work on a Thursday evening should have been ordinary. I'm a CPA at a mid-sized firm in Charlotte, and spring is our slow season, the quiet after the storm of tax deadline. I had picked up Chloe's favorite Thai food, pad see ew with extra tofu, because she'd been going through a vegetarian phase, and I was genuinely looking forward to an easy night. She had been anxious for 2 weeks, waiting on the decision letter from the Harlow Summer Conservatory, a 6-week residential arts program at a university 2 states away, selective, prestigious, the kind of thing that goes on a college application and opens doors that stay closed to most kids. Chloe is 13, and she draws the way some people breathe, constantly and without thinking. Her sketchbooks are stacked on every flat surface in her room, filled with faces and hands and impossible architectural structures she invents in her head. Her art teacher had submitted the application on her behalf, telling me in a quiet voice after a parent conference that Chloe was the most naturally gifted student she had taught in 22 years. I hadn't told Chloe that. I didn't want the pressure to twist what came naturally to her. I pulled into our driveway, and Chloe was sitting on the front steps. Not in the good way, the way kids sit outside when they're waiting for a friend or enjoying the weather. She was hunched forward with her elbows on her knees and her head down. Her sketchbook was next to her but closed, which was how I knew something was wrong. Chloe's sketchbook was never closed when she was okay. I turned off the engine and got out slowly. She looked up when she heard the car door, and I saw that her eyes were swollen, not currently crying. The past tense of crying, when the face has been through something and is just beginning to dry out. "Hey," I said. I set the takeout bag on the porch railing and sat down next to her. "What happened?" She handed me her phone without saying anything. On the screen was a text from her art teacher, Mrs. Calloway. "Chloe, I wanted to check in because the conservatory director emailed me this afternoon. He said the acceptance packet they mailed 3 weeks ago was returned to them as undeliverable. Your address was written incorrectly on the envelope. They tried to reach your mom but had a wrong number on file. I gave them the corrected information and they are resending, but I want you to know your spot is still held. You were accepted. Congratulations, sweetheart. I'm so sorry for the confusion." I read the message twice. Then I read it a third time, slower. 3 weeks ago. The letter had been sent 3 weeks ago, and it had come back undeliverable. Our address wasn't complicated. We had lived in the same house for 4 years. I paid bills here. I received packages here. There was no universe in which a letter mailed to our address came back undeliverable unless someone had made sure it would. "Who has access to our mail?" Chloe asked, her voice smaller than it should be for her age. I looked at her. I didn't answer right away because the answer was already sitting in my chest like a stone, and I needed a moment before I let it become real. 3 weeks ago. What was happening 3 weeks ago in our family? The conservatory sent letters to all applicants on the same day. I knew this because Chloe's friend Piper had applied too, and Piper's mom had texted me when Piper received her letter, a kind rejection note, and asked how Chloe was doing. I had told her we hadn't received anything yet. I had assumed it was a mail delay. I had moved on. 3 weeks ago, my sister-in-law Vanessa's daughter Madison had also received a rejection from the Harlow Summer Conservatory. Vanessa had called me about it. She had been furious, in the careful, controlled way she was always furious, where the anger was wrapped in the language of concern. She said the program was biased. She said the selection committee clearly didn't understand fine arts. She said Madison's portfolio was exceptional and that someone must have evaluated it incorrectly. She talked for 22 minutes. She did not ask how Chloe's application was going. My brother Daniel and Vanessa had been living in the rental property I owned on Sycamore Court for 3 years. When Daniel's landscaping business went under and they needed somewhere to go, I had stepped in because he was my brother, and that's what family did. The house was a 3-bedroom craftsman that I had bought as an investment 5 years earlier. Market rent in that neighborhood was running about $2,300 a month, I charged them $1,400. I had drawn up a proper lease because I worked in finance, and I knew that handshake agreements between family members were how relationships ended. The lease was month to month, standard terms, with a clause about lawful use of the premises. Vanessa picked up the mail at Sycamore Court sometimes, when she and Daniel were watching Chloe after school. I had given them a spare key 2 years ago for emergencies. Chloe occasionally stayed with them on the days I worked late and school let out before I was home. It was practical. It was family helping family. Or I had thought it was. I told Chloe to go inside and eat. I told her the conservatory had her spot, and she was going, and that everything else was my problem to sort out. She nodded. That particular nod teenagers do when they are trying to believe you and not quite managing it. I watched her disappear into the house, and then I sat on the porch alone for 4 minutes, doing the math. The letter would have arrived at Sycamore Court by mistake only if someone had written our address incorrectly on the conservatory application. The application had been submitted by Mrs. Calloway from the school. She would have used our address from the school's file, which was correct. So the mailing address on the conservatory's system had been wrong. That meant someone had contacted the conservatory and provided a different address. Or someone had intercepted the letter, written our address on it incorrectly, and sent it back. Either way, it was deliberate. Either way, it required effort. And either way, it pointed towards someone who had known about the application and had motive. I went inside, kissed Chloe on the top of her head while she picked at her noodles, and went to my office. I pulled up the conservatory's website and found the main office number. I called and reached a program coordinator named James, who confirmed everything in Mrs. Calloway's text. The acceptance letter had been returned from a mailing address that was slightly different from what they had on file now. 1 digit off on the street number. He read me the address they had originally mailed to. It was not our address. It was close, but not ours. Close enough to seem like a data entry error, wrong enough to guarantee the letter would bounce back. Did anyone contact your office to update or change the mailing address before you sent the letters? I asked. James put me on hold for 3 minutes. When he came back, he said that yes, approximately a week before letters went out, someone had called the office and said they were calling on behalf of an applicant named Chloe to verify the address on file. The person on the phone had given a slightly different address, and the staff member had updated it in the system. Can you tell me anything about that call? I asked. Do you record them? We do retain call logs, he said, but I'd need to escalate that to our director. Is there something wrong? I need you to pull that information and preserve it, I said. I'm going to be in touch again very soon. I hung up and sat with my hands flat on my desk for a moment. Then I called my attorney. Her name was Patricia, and she specialized in civil litigation. I had used her twice before for real estate matters, and she had a way of listening to a problem the way a surgeon listens to a diagnosis, quietly and with total focus. I told her everything. She did not interrupt. When I finished, she was quiet for 2 seconds, and then she said, if someone called a third party and impersonated you or your daughter to redirect mail, that is potentially federal mail fraud and wire fraud. It's certainly tortious interference. I'm going to get you the number for the Postal Inspection Service. I want you to file a report tonight. Do not contact Vanessa. Do not contact your brother. Do not mention any of this to anyone in the family yet. Document everything first. I wrote down the number she gave me. I documented everything first. The postal inspector I spoke to that night was a woman named Agent Torres. She had a flat, methodical voice that reminded me of a nurse in an emergency room, someone who had seen enough chaos that nothing surprised her anymore. She took down every detail I gave her. She told me they would subpoena the call records from the conservatory, and that this type of case, call-in address manipulation to intercept time-sensitive mail, was something their office handled. She told me to write down every interaction I'd had with Vanessa in the last month and to save every text message. I spent the next hour writing everything down. After I put Chloe to bed, I sat in the kitchen and reread the conservatory coordinator's email one more time. 3 weeks. For 3 weeks, Chloe had been waiting for a letter she deserved, a letter that would have told her she was exceptional, that her gift was real and seen by people who knew what they were looking at. And for 3 weeks, Vanessa had apparently known the letter wasn't coming because she had made sure of it. She had watched Chloe's anxiety grow over dinner conversations. She had watched me shrug and say, "Mail is slow sometimes," and she had said nothing. I thought about Madison. I thought about what it meant to be that child, the one whose mother turned her daughter's disappointment into someone else's destruction. I felt something for Madison that had nothing to do with anger. I also thought about the lease agreement sitting in my fireproof file cabinet. The next morning, I texted Vanessa. Normal light. "Hey, any chance you grabbed mail from the house that might have been accidentally addressed wrong? Chloe's waiting on something from a camp." Casual. Unthreatening. Vanessa replied within 4 minutes. "No, nothing like that. Mail's been normal here. Why? Is everything okay?" She used 2 question marks. "I noticed." I responded, "All good. Just following up. Thanks." I saved the screenshot of the exchange, emailed it to myself and to Patricia, and began drafting an email to Sarah at North Point Property Management, the company I had recently been considering hiring to manage Sycamore Court professionally. I copied Patricia. "I want to move forward on the management transition," I wrote. "There may also be a lease termination situation emerging. I need to know the proper procedure for a 30-day notice to vacate under a month-to-month agreement in North Carolina, as well as whether a tenant's involvement in a federal investigation constitutes grounds for earlier termination under the Unlawful Activity Clause. Please advise as soon as possible." I sent the email. Then I made Chloe's lunch, drove her to school, watched her walk through the front entrance, and told myself she was going to be fine. The call from Agent Torres came 4 days later. She had moved quickly. The conservatory had cooperated fully. They had call logs, and the number that had been used to call in the address change was a burner app number. However, the device IP associated with the app account was registered to a home Wi-Fi network at an address on Sycamore Court. Sycamore Court was where Daniel and Vanessa lived. "In my house. We'll be reaching out to your sister-in-law for questioning," Agent Torres said. "I want to let you know before we do so, you're not caught off guard if she contacts you. She'll contact me the second she realizes what's happening," I said. "Probably," Agent Torres agreed. "Try not to engage." The call came from Daniel, not Vanessa. That surprised me. He called at 6:15 in the evening, when he would have known I was home from work and Chloe might be nearby. I stepped outside onto the back deck before I answered. "Sophie." His voice was thick. "What is going on?" "There are federal agents asking Vanessa questions about Chloe's mail. What did you do?" "What did I do?" I repeated. "You filed a report. You went to the government over a piece of mail. Are you serious right now?" She didn't look. "It's complicated. Vanessa was upset about Madison, and she made a bad decision, okay? She didn't think it would be a big deal. Chloe got in anyway, right? It all worked out." Hearing it out loud, his voice low and quick, the way you talk when you're minimizing something while pretending you're not, was like touching a bruise I hadn't known was there until that moment. He knew. He had known. Maybe not when it happened. Maybe he had found out later. But he knew now, and his first instinct had been to call me and ask what I had done. "She intercepted a federal mailing," I said. "She deliberately redirected correspondence that was addressed to my daughter." "That is a crime, Daniel. It is a federal crime. And your daughter sat in this house for 3 weeks, not knowing she was accepted, thinking she had been rejected, while your wife knew exactly where that letter was. She didn't destroy it," he said, as if that were a point in Vanessa's favor. She redirected it. She panicked. She made a phone call pretending to be acting on behalf of Chloe," I said. "She used a fake number." "That's not panic. That's planning." His silence lasted long enough that I could hear someone talking in the background of wherever he was. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted from defensive to something closer to desperate. "Look, if this becomes a federal case, Vanessa could face actual charges. This could affect everything. Our finances, our reputation in the neighborhood, Madison's school." "Daniel," I said quietly, "did you just tell me that your daughter's reputation in the neighborhood is something I should be weighing against what was done to my daughter?" "That's not what because I want to make sure I understand what we're talking about," I said. We're not talking about a misunderstanding. We're not talking about an accident. Someone in your house committed a crime against my child. And you're asking me to make it go away because it's inconvenient for you. You could talk to the agents, he said. Tell them it was a mistake. They might drop it if the victim's family asks them to. I'm not the victim's family, I said. I'm her mother, and she is the victim, and I'm not asking them to drop anything. Sophie, please. And Daniel, I said. One more thing. What? You should probably look at your lease. He went quiet. I spoke to Patricia the next morning. Given the ongoing federal investigation and Vanessa's deliberate act of tortious interference against a minor, she confirmed that the unlawful activity clause in the lease provided clear grounds for termination. She also noted that in North Carolina, month-to-month tenants could be given a 7-day notice to vacate for material lease violations, not just 30 days. Vanessa's conduct qualified. We filed the notice the following Tuesday through a professional process server, which Patricia had strongly recommended. I did not deliver it myself. I did not call ahead. The process server arrived at the Sycamore Court property at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday and handed the documents to Vanessa at the front door. My phone began ringing 40 minutes later. I did not answer Vanessa's calls. I did not respond to her texts. The texts came in rapid succession, ranging from furious to pleading to threatening and back to furious again within the span of about 20 minutes. At one point, she threatened to contact my employer and tell them I was engaged in a personal vendetta that was affecting my professional judgment. I took screenshots of everything and sent them to Patricia, who added them to the growing file. The next call was from my mother. She had heard from Daniel, who had apparently heard Vanessa's version of events, which was that I was systematically destroying a family over a minor clerical issue because I had always been jealous of Vanessa's relationship with Daniel. My mother did not ask how Chloe was doing. She asked me to please consider the bigger picture and remember that family was forever. I told her I completely agreed that family was forever. I told her that was exactly why I took it so seriously when a member of our family deliberately sabotaged my daughter's future and then lied to my face when I asked about it. I told her I loved her, and I hung up. What happened next was something I had not anticipated. Vanessa posted on the neighborhood Facebook group. She didn't name me directly, but she described a property dispute with a family member who was using financial leverage to bully a young mother out of her home. She said she was being evicted during a federal investigation that had been manufactured by someone who couldn't accept that not everyone could afford to give their child every advantage. The post got 43 comments. Most of them were sympathetic. Several people tagged local housing advocacy organizations. She was painting herself as the victim of an eviction. She wasn't painting herself as the woman who had committed federal mail fraud against a child. I called Patricia and read her the post. She was quiet for a moment and then said, "That post is useful to us." She's characterizing a legal eviction as retaliatory in a public forum, which she can do, but she's also inadvertently admitting the relationship between the eviction and the investigation, which is going to be relevant when we need to establish motive and timeline. Save it. I saved it. The hearing was something I hadn't originally planned for, but Patricia had suggested it when Vanessa filed a counter-complaint in small claims court, alleging that I had initiated a federal complaint as a retaliatory measure, following a personal dispute, and that the eviction was unlawful. The counter-complaint was thin. Patricia described it as a delaying tactic, but it put us in front of a judge, and that turned out to matter. The courtroom was small and administrative, the kind of room reserved for disputes that were too procedurally mundane for a full trial, but too contentious to resolve between the parties. A magistrate named Judge Okafor presided. He had reading glasses and a composure that suggested he had seen every variety of family real estate dispute and had long since stopped finding any of them surprising. Vanessa arrived with a man I didn't recognize, someone from a legal aid clinic, young and visibly underprepared. She had dressed carefully, soft colors, a knit cardigan. She looked like someone's gentle aunt. She had done her hair. Madison was not with her. Daniel was not with her. She came alone, and that absence told me something about where things stood at home. Her attorney presented the counter-complaint as a procedural matter. The eviction notice had been issued in bad faith, he argued, as retaliation for a personal disagreement between the tenant and the landlord. He said that the so-called lease violation was a pretext, that the landlord had fabricated grounds for eviction in connection with a federal complaint that was itself under review. He did not produce evidence to support any of these claims. He made assertions as if assertions were sufficient. Patricia went second. She was brief. She presented the lease agreement with the unlawful activity clause highlighted. She presented the timeline of Agent Torres's investigation, which she had obtained a summary letter for with the agent's permission. She presented the call logs from the conservatory, showing the fraudulent address change. She presented my text exchange with Vanessa 4 days after the letter had been redirected, in which Vanessa had explicitly denied knowing anything about any mislabeled mail. That was relevant not just as evidence of the original act, but as evidence of deliberate deception of the landlord. "Your Honor," Patricia said, "the tenant committed a federal offense from the leased property, used a communication device on the property's network to do so, and then lied directly to the property owner when asked about it. The eviction notice is lawful, well-documented, and procedurally correct. The counter-complaint is a delay tactic and should be dismissed." Judge Okafor looked at the papers in front of him for about 30 seconds. Then he looked at Vanessa. "Ma'am," he said, "you're alleging that this eviction is retaliatory. Can you tell me what personal disagreement preceded the landlord filing the federal complaint?" Vanessa shifted in her seat. She had been composed through her attorney's presentation, but something in the directness of the question seemed to reach her. She said, "We had a misunderstanding about some of our children's school activities." The judge's expression didn't change. He said, "The federal investigation concerns mail tampering related to your niece's acceptance letter. Is that the misunderstanding you're referring to?" Vanessa said, "I didn't think it was as serious as she's making it." "You didn't think federal mail tampering was serious," the judge said, his tone entirely flat. "It was a phone call," Vanessa said, and something in her voice cracked at the edge, not with remorse, but with the particular frustration of someone who genuinely did not understand why everyone was treating this as a large thing. "My daughter was devastated. Her cousin got into the same program she didn't, and I just thought if Chloe didn't know for a little while, maybe Madison could find another program, and it wouldn't be such a big deal." The courtroom was quiet. "Your niece is 13, the judge said. "Yes. And you deliberately prevented a 13-year-old child from learning that she had earned a competitive placement in an arts program because your daughter didn't get in." Vanessa didn't answer, and when the child's mother asked you directly whether you had any information about misdirected mail, you told her no. Vanessa's attorney put his hand on her arm. "The counter-complaint is dismissed," Judge Okafor said. "The eviction notice stands. Respondent has 14 days to vacate the premises." He looked at Vanessa one more time over his reading glasses and said, "And I would strongly encourage you to cooperate fully with the postal inspector's office." He brought the gavel down, and that was the end of it. I walked out of the courthouse into a gray April afternoon and stood on the steps while Patricia gathered her files. I felt none of the things I expected to feel, not triumph, not relief exactly. Something quieter and more tired, like a noise that had been in the background of my life for long enough that I had stopped hearing it, and then suddenly it stopped, and the silence was so complete that it took a moment to recognize it as silence. My phone buzzed. It was Daniel. "I heard," he said when I answered. "She called you from the courthouse?" "She called me from the parking lot." He paused. "I'm not defending her, Sophie. I haven't been defending her for a while now, if I'm being honest. I just didn't know how to stop." "How long did you know?" He was quiet. "Long enough," he finally said. "I found out about 2 weeks after the letter was sent back. She told me it was just an address mix-up, that she'd accidentally given them the wrong number when she called to ask a question. I believed her longer than I should have. But you stopped believing her." "Yeah," he exhaled. "She doesn't think she did anything wrong. Even now, she thinks she was protecting Madison." "She was protecting herself," I said. "Madison didn't ask for this." "No." He sounded exhausted in a way that went beyond the phone call. "No, she didn't. Sophie, I want you to know I'm going to make sure Chloe knows that what happened was wrong. Not from you. From me. She should hear it from me. I'll tell her you said that, I said. And Daniel? Make sure Madison is okay. She's the one living in the middle of this, and none of it is her fault. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, thank you. The eviction happened on the 14-day deadline. I hired a property management company to handle the physical turnover because I didn't want to be there and I didn't need to be there. The property manager sent me photos of the house afterward. The walls were in decent shape. The kitchen needed work. Someone had scratched something into the paint of the hallway closet door, but it was shallow and easy to sand out. Overall, it was fine. It was just a house. Daniel was not with Vanessa when she moved out. He had taken Madison and gone to stay with a college friend across town. From what I gathered through the careful secondhand information that filtered through to me over the following weeks, he had told Vanessa he needed space to decide whether he could continue the marriage after this. Vanessa had, by the account of the property manager, he'd been extremely uncooperative on move-out day and had refused to allow the manager access to the second bedroom until the sheriff's deputy, who accompanied the process, reminded her that the lock on the door belonged to the property owner and not to her. She had left a piece of paper on the kitchen counter, face down. When the property manager flipped it over, it was a letter addressed to me in Vanessa's handwriting. He took a photo and sent it to me. It was 2 paragraphs. The first said that I had always been jealous of what she and Daniel had built, and that I had used my money to destroy a family instead of being a real part of one. The second paragraph said that Madison would carry the damage from this for years and that I should be ashamed. I looked at that letter for a while. Then I saved the photo in the same folder where I kept everything else. Not as evidence, just because I thought someday I might want to look at it again and feel something different about it than I did today. Today, I felt mostly sad. The federal case was ongoing as of the last update I had from Agent Torres. Because Vanessa had cooperated partially during questioning, her attorney was working toward a resolution that would likely involve a fine and formal probation rather than prosecution, but nothing was finalized. The civil case for tortious interference was still active. Patricia was handling it. I didn't think about it much day to day. What I thought about was Chloe. She found out the full story from me, not in pieces, not filtered. I sat with her on the back porch on a Saturday morning, 3 weeks after the courthouse, and I told her everything that had happened, from the redirected letter to the eviction, to the federal investigation, to the magistrate's ruling. She listened the way she always listened, quietly and with her full attention, her sketchbook open on her lap, but her pencil still. When I finished, she didn't say anything for almost a minute. Then she said, "Why?" "Because Madison didn't get in, and she did," I said. "And because your aunt couldn't separate her own feelings from what was fair." Chloe looked down at the blank page in her sketchbook. Did she think I wouldn't find out? I think she thought if enough time passed, it wouldn't matter. Chloe considered that. "That's actually worse," she said. "I know. Is Madison okay?" I thought about Daniel's voice on the phone. I thought about a 12-year-old girl who had been raised by a woman who believed that love meant removing every obstacle, including other people's children, and who was now watching her mother face legal consequences for it. "I think she will be," I said. "She has your uncle." Chloe nodded slowly. "Can I write her a letter? Like, from me? Not about any of the legal stuff. Just like, 'I don't blame you,' kind of letter?" I pulled her into a hug and didn't say anything for a while. She went to the Harlow Summer Conservatory in June. I drove her the 4 hours to the university campus and helped her carry her bags into the dormitory. Her roommate was a girl from Ohio who drew editorial cartoons and played 3 instruments badly and excellently at the same time. They became friends before dinner on the first day. The night before I drove home, Chloe and I sat on the steps outside the arts building as the sun went down. She had already filled 12 pages of a new sketchbook, fast, loose drawings of the campus and her roommate and the light on the old brick buildings. She showed me each one. "Are you scared?" I asked. "A little," she said, "in the good way." I looked at her profile against the evening light and thought about everything that had been done to keep her from sitting exactly here and the fact that she was here anyway. I thought about the letter that had been sent back and the phone call that had redirected it and the woman who had believed she could reach into my daughter's future and rearrange it to suit her own grief. "The people who try to hold you back," I said, usually do it because they're afraid of what happens when you move forward. Chloe glanced at me. Is that a CPA thought or a mom thought? It's a both thought, I said. She laughed and leaned her head against my shoulder, and we watched the sky change colors over the arts building for a while longer. I rented the house on Sycamore Court to a young couple by the end of summer. They were quiet, worked from home, had a dog named after a Roman emperor, and paid their rent 3 days early every month. I raised the rate to market value. It wasn't personal. It was just the thing I should have done from the beginning. The thing I had avoided because I thought keeping the peace was the same thing as keeping the family. I know now they're not the same. Keeping the peace just meant that the things that needed to be said went unsaid, and the things that needed to stop kept going, and eventually something happened that was bad enough that it couldn't be unsaid and couldn't be stopped. I draw my lines earlier now. I make them visible. And when someone crosses them, I don't ask myself whether enforcing a boundary is worth the cost to the relationship. I ask myself what it will cost my daughter if I don't. That question is never hard to answer.